So I've had some people ask me about the Concord situation, and I paid attention to it, but I also saw as it was going downhill. So I didn't touch the game, and I didn't really put a lot of effort into figuring out how I felt about the game. It was just one of those games that I would never play intentionally and never really cared about. And to sum that up, I think that's really, really, really all I have to say about the game. It wasn't something that had caught my attention. It wasn't something that made me think, "Ooh, I need to check that out." I didn't see the hallmarks of a good game in it, and so because I'm a biased person who's worked at AAA game studios, and because I've worked at Xbox, and because I did things like help ship an actual Xbox console and those things, I have unique life experience that I know other people don't have. And so I don't expect that other people will agree with me on these kind of things. But what I will say is that I didn't like the art style. I felt that it wasn't inclusive enough. And you might think to yourself, Dwayne, are you trolling? No, I'm not. You see, I felt like, while looking at the art style, that it was a ripoff of a bunch of other games. I didn't see it as its own unique thing trying to chart its own path. As a result, I didn't consider it to be something that was trying to be inclusive or create something new that I could identify with. I saw it as a bunch of characters that were clearly ripoffs of other games. Some of them merged together as if there were multiple types of other characters. And quite frankly, the red Thanos guy in this image is kind of a great way of seeing that. And so like I I look at this and I go, okay, they've taken all the servers offline. It's dead. Like, somebody told me that they spent 8 years making it just to delete it as soon as it launched. And as somebody who's gone to startup, has been a part of startups and actually, built companies from scratch, I just consider the executives who allowed that to happen to be incompetent. That I am not a big name in game development, not anymore. If I ever was, I own GameDev.com, and I own a few other things that are related to game development, and I'm definitely going to be a part of the community going forward, as I've always been a part of it in some way for the last 20, 25 so years. But looking at the game and what I can find out about it online, it was doomed to fail. And I think it's important to call that out because I think the game artists and the people who spent time working on it, I how can I say this? I feel sorry for them because they put their heart and soul into a game, and I want to be supportive because I love my game dev community. I love my game dev family. But at the same time, they chose to join that team. They applied to that job. They said, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to be a part of the team. I'm going to do whatever. And then they made that game. Now, if you look at the information that's been publicly available, some of the artists have been very vocal on Twitter about some of the politics and some of the leadership by a committee and things like that. And so to that, I would say, why didn't you use the authority that you had as leads to make executive decisions and do the good that you could? And if you did do that and it still failed because of issues above you, how long did you let that go on before the game ultimately failed? Some of the people on that team were there for over 8 years. Okay, they came in day one, knew there was a problem, and they stuck around. Fact is, somebody working on a game for only a year or two probably could have just gone do another game, probably gone to another studio, been successful, done something else. They chose to hitch their horse to this ride. They didn't think about anything else. Now, I want to be supportive. I want to be candid. And I want to just flat out say, look, Concord was a bad game. The market said so. The user said so. And the distributor said so. Firewalk Studios destroyed the game because it wasn't good enough for the players. But I'm happy that they actually took it out behind the shed and did it themselves. Because, well, that's maturity. And for that, they should be applauded. The core issue here, from everything I've seen, is that there wasn't strong leadership. And the people that were just following the leader because they wanted the opportunity to be in the game space probably did so because they thought this was their one opportunity. It was their first game and they didn't know better, or maybe they just felt like this was their chance to make a mark. Well, the users have spoken, the game director has spoken. It's a dead game. It's never going to see the light of day again. People are getting refunded. If you haven't uninstalled it already, please do so. You need the space. But what I will say is that those people who worked on that game, they use technology skills that not everybody has. Okay. If they can find strong leadership and a place to put their actual skills to use in a directed and coordinated way that will allow them to build something that people actually want, then I look forward to that. And I know some of you got kicked in the teeth. If you're watching this, I understand. I've been there. But this is part of the game industry. Okay. You can put your heart and soul into something. You can sit there and be doing inverse schematic rigging in Maya and Mudbox, trying to figure out how to minimize the verts on a model for literally days before you crash and go to sleep and then get up and do it again. And I know that because I have some technical artist skills. Okay. I've done inverse kinematic rigging. I'm not very good at it. I'm not very good with Mudbox, but yeah, I know these tools. And so when I think about what's required to put a game like this out, that's a lot of work. And for that, you should be proud because you did the work. And I respect you because you did the work. Was the output bad? That's what the market says. Doesn't matter what I believe. But I will say that with a few leadership changes and a more, let's just say, strategic goal, Concord could have been great. And it would have been something that people would have wanted. But there were multiple issues here, and it wasn't just the art. Okay. The marketing team failed, the sales team failed, the business development manager failed. The game director completely failed by not considering those elements. The leadership team completely failed. And I know that because I heard the complaints from players about the issues with lag and everything else. And so, from a DevOps perspective, that's kind of sus. Why are you deploying buggy games? Why aren't you testing it? Why isn't there enough QA to make sure that people actually enjoy it? Which makes me think maybe they didn't invest enough in QA. Maybe they didn't actually listen to the QA people when the QA people filed a bug. And so, in my mind, I look at this and I go, yeah, that's probably what happened. So, to the people asking me what I think about this, I think it's a damn shame that a company wasted so much money for 8 years on a game that ultimately got deleted just after launch. I think it's a shame that people put their heart and soul into something only to have it fall flat on the market because they weren't allowed to iterate and release smaller test versions or art samples or whatever, demos, etc., earlier to figure out if they had alignment with the market or not. I think it's a damn shame that the marketing and sales people for the studio didn't have their back. And I think it's kind of sad that nobody knew about this game until after it launched because all of that was done wrong. But most importantly, I look at this and I see that a lot of the AI stuff was clearly used for figuring out things like, you know, just these characters are so similar to other games. Like, have some ideas of your own, buddy, please. If you're going to call yourself an artist, at least have your own ideas. And so, like, if you got forced to make this stuff because, leadership was by committee, well, what are you going to put on your resume? Are you going to admit that you worked in Concord for 8 years and then it failed? Or are you going to try to do something like, oh no, I was in jail for that time, sorry? Because you don't really have much choice there. Okay. You applied to that job, you got on that team, and then you chose to stay. Sucks. That's just how it is. But I look at this art style and it's not AAA. That's all I can say. I've worked with people that were able to do much better. This reminds me of the work of an intern that I once had to interact with. And that's sad because I look at this and I go, wow, somebody really put time and effort into it. I can see that there's almost there's different clashing art styles here. And I'm wondering how much of it is AI generated, to be honest. Because I look at the shading and the matte and everything, and I go, oh, some of this looks oil, some of it looks colored pencil, some of it looks digital. Okay, maybe that was the vibe. Maybe that was what they wanted. But in my mind, as I look at it, it's too random. There's no coherence. And that is something that any artist worth their salt would have been able to look at and go, yeah. So, yeah, I can definitely agree. There was a committee involved. There was no strong leadership because I can look at the art and I can see that. And you know what? Maybe that's just not fair for the artists. Maybe it's not fair for the devs who worked on it. Maybe they weren't given the opportunity to be successful because the committee above them didn't allow it. But that's when you leave, okay? A lot of people have this idea of AAA studios where they feel like, oh, I'm here now. I can do stuff. I just have to stay. I'll just tough it out. That's toxic, man. Don't do that. Don't hurt yourself like that. It's very clear to me. I look at some of the art for the game, and there were some very talented people working on it. But it was also clear that they weren't allowed to work on the things that they wanted to work on. It was very clear to me that they actively were being forced to do artistic stuff that didn't really inherently come from their soul. And there was just a few sparks here and there that showed me that every once in a while somebody got to work on something that really made them passionate. And I know what that's like. Okay. I know what it's like to watch an artist get excited about something and get a stack of books and, if they're, a model of some kind, to figure out, like, I remember once there was one artist that I knew very well. She had to do a dragon. And so she took her pet snake and she obsessed over that thing. And it was used for the modeling for the scales. She would sit there and stare at that snake for hours. But she was so happy to sit there and do the inverse kinetic rigging of the spine, the reticulation of the neck of the dragon for hours and hours and hours to get it just perfect. And so I've seen that passion. I've seen that care. And I know what it looks like when the product's done. That's not what I'm looking at right now. And so I think the one bit of advice that I could give is that if you're a digital artist and you're working on games and it doesn't excite you, find a new project. Pay the bills if you have to, but find a new project because that passion, that excitement, that's going to reflect with the output of your work. The rest of us are going to see if you're passionate or not when we look at the screen. And that's going to make us think differently about the game. And I think that's honestly one of the big things I want to call out about Concord. The art style hits different, but not in the way that people want it. Because of all the conflict on the committees and the difference in emotions on the art team and difference in emotions and how the people were designing things, that all came out. That's the kind of thing you don't want. So, no, stop with the committees. Let people be passionate. Otherwise, you'll just get another Concord. You don't want to Concord your game. Seriously.